All right, Brian, to wrap up today's show today, we are going to start talking about Texas A&M's defense. And at times last season, this was a little bit of a kryptonite to this team. We know how many points they gave up against Auburn. They gave up 35 against USC in a bowl game. They did not look good against South Carolina, which is a little bit surprising considering who their head coach is, a very defensive-minded player. And it's something that you did not see coming.
Oh, bull. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I did. I said it all last offseason. This is the biggest mistake that Mike Elko made was hiring Jay Bateman as his defensive coordinator. That's why. You don't expect it from a Mike Elko defense. But the minute he hired Jay Bateman, I did. Now, I was alone in that. Well, I wasn't alone, but I was in the minority in that because there's still a lot of people that think Jay Bateman's good, or a lot of people just thought, and maybe this is where you coming from, Trev. Look, Mike Elko's the head coach. That's what a lot of people say about Marcus Freeman. Mike Elko's the head coach. Defense is going to be fine. The problem in year one, however, is Mike Elko had to establish himself as the head coach.
Fair.
First and foremost. So he couldn't work with the defense as much. And that's why I think this year might be a little bit different, Trev. And I know you had read something about that also that is going to make it very interesting. But I honestly was not surprised that their defense struggled last year because of who he hired as a defensive coordinator.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's fair. Then, okay, misspoke. Maybe not you per se. I was. The majority was. But
I hung 600 on Jay Bateman in the game. I'm just saying, like when I coached against him, I'm just saying, like we went for like 630 on him. Never been he's still getting love because of what he did at Army. It's terrible at North Carolina. Like I still haven't understood this hire, but I think they're going to fix that in year two.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. At the tail end of spring, there was an article put out by Athlon Sports, and it was Jay Bateman addressing the media, just talking about some defensive changes that they were going to do. And there's some things that they're doing schematically. He was very vocal around Mike Elko is going to get more involved with the defense this upcoming season, more hands-on, meaning not necessarily calling plays and calling the defense on the sideline, but very involved of giving his input and installation. They're scrapping some old ideas, and they're more modernizing their defense. And with some of what we're getting ready to talk about, some of the personnel that they have coming back, I think that's a smart move because there were some things that they did last season that were a little bit uncharacteristic of what a Mike Elko thought of defense was. It was a little weird to see it unfold on the field. And so that's where this defense is at heading into this season. And I think this part of the ball, yes, the offense will have the opportunity to put it over the top and, with the running game and what their offensive line is made up of, they'll be a good team in the SEC, but defensively is where if they get that aspect shored up, I don't think they're going to have as wide of a margin of error of doing what you did against LSU, but then also doing what you did against South Carolina.
It's the variance in their performance last year. Like, I don't think this version of the A&M defense has the talent to be as dominant as last year's defense was and it was on. Now, there weren't a lot of games where they played that way for an entire game, but there were stretches where they played that way. There were times when their run defense was brilliant and their pass defense wasn't, or when their pass defense was really good and their run defense wasn't. I think you'll see a little bit more consistency in that regard this year. But last year, it was about, in my opinion, underachieving talent. I think part of that was scheme. I think part of that, too, was, let's just be honest, there were some guys that I don't know were as bought into the team aspect of it that you'd want them to be, and most of those guys are gone now. And so they're going to be a little bit more, like up front, for example, a little bit more kind of try-hard guys as opposed to a bunch of potential first-round draft picks. But I think their guys are going to play with more consistency, play with better motors, and then you're pretty good on the back end, the linebacker and secondary. But I know a lot of people, I think they look at A&M taking a step back because of what they lost up front, and that's very fair. But I think they were pretty deep defensive line last year, like Notre Dame, losing, 2 All-American defensive tackles and losing R.J. Oben and that type of thing. But they had good depth. They got a couple portal guys in on the defensive line. They've got some young players who can play. But I think it's more about just they got to play with more consistency of execution. That's what killed them last year, Trev. You and I were talking about this before the show. There were times when you're just like, a JV offense could have hit that hole. Like there was no, like either they didn't execute it correctly or the call was just terrible. Either way, it's still on the defensive coordinator. And there are just times you're just like, I don't understand what you're giving up right now. And especially as teams got more and more film on what they did, that's why you saw them. They looked pretty decent early, but then after you got a little bit of film on them, they kind of fell apart second half of the year. And when their defensive line didn't get home, they were in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think to your point, that feeds into what some of the question marks are that some people have about this team, because they lost Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, and Shamar Turner. Those are heavy hitting names, but who they have coming back along the defensive line, I think, to your point about them maybe not being round one NFL draft talent, I think it's going to be really, really good for what this defensive line needs. Albert Regis, he was a starter last season. He comes back along the interior. Cassius Howell is somebody that I'm really paying attention to off of the edge. He was somebody last season who he had 34 total pressures, 24 hurries, 10 hits plus sacks on the quarterback. He finished the season with 4 sacks. He's somebody that he can hurt you off the edge. He has good size. He's not as twitchy of an athlete, I think, as Nick Scorton was, but he was productive. He was
Definitely
very consistent.
Big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He's very consistent. To your point about having the motor, I think it's going to be more of a constant motor out of Howell this season. I don't know if he'll have some of the highest of highs as what Scorton or Turner or Stewart had, but
he's not as dominant of a talent as what they were. I mean, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, absolutely. But this defensive line group, again, similar to who Mike Elko wants to be in the trenches, they have pretty decent size. They're not an overly massive group, but they have good size and they have good motors compared to times last.
Their DNs last year were like 275 and 285.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
they were big guys, but like the thing for me, like Rylan Kennedy's a good football player. I think Cassius Howell's a good football player. If you're saying like, okay, they don't have the elite first round NFL talent that they had last year, okay, that's fair. But it's more so. I think what the issue is when I look at A&M, Trevor, are you evaluating them on what they lost, what they had, or what they have? And my whole thing is what they lost is sort of irrelevant to this conversation. It's about what do they have? Do they have players that can step in and be good football players? And to that degree, I think that they do. I mean, you talked about Cassius Howell was a rotation guy last year. Rotation guy that had 8.5 tackles for loss, which was third on the defense. And so, Cassius Howell is not Nick Scourton. I don't think. He's not he's actually better than the kid that got drafted 17th overall, Shamar Stewart. He's a better player. He's just not the freak talent athlete that the Shamar Stewart was, but he's definitely a better, like a more productive player is I guess the way that I'm trying to do that and frame that. I think that's clear when you look at the production he had last year. When you look at what he did at Bowling Green 2 years ago, he had 10.5 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. Last year he comes to Texas A&M, and as part of a rotation, he's a guy that has 8.5 tackles for loss and 4 sacks, but he wasn't an every down player like he was at Bowling Green. So you bring in TJ Searcy from Florida, who last year had 4 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. The year before that, 3.5 tackles for loss, half a sack. In his first 2 years at Florida, 6'5", 255, good sized kid, quality athlete. That was a key member of the rotation. He's a guy that it's a good rotation player. And so when I look at this team, Trev, I just see guys that they don't have quite the same type of the elite level players they had last year, but they have good potential. And what can Rylan Kennedy step into the lineup and produce? I think or does TJ Searcy go over there? Like this is the depth chart that Athlon Sports provided in their preseason magazine, but I could see TJ Searcy being over on the other side. And kind of step Searcy. I put Yersey. It's my bad on the spelling there, but TJ Searcy starting over there. They got Deion Hayes out of the portal. If you remember him, he was a kid that had some pretty silly things to say last offseason. He was at Pitt 2 years ago, had 10.5 tackles for loss and 4 sacks, and then it's like, I'm going to Colorado because I want to win, and didn't work out for him at Colorado. And he had 3.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. He comes in. He'll be much better off playing in this system than he did in Colorado's. And I think he'll be somewhere in between what he was at Pitt and what he was here. He's a good rotation player. He's not even in the two deep on Athlon, but he comes in. So there's a lot of good football players. Does anybody step up as a star? I don't know the answer to that, but you can have a pretty darn good defense with these two guys, this group of guys on the defensive end, as long as your interior is good as what I think it's going to be. And I think this is a group that I think is going to be pretty good for them. I think Mike Elko wants to have interior guys that eat up space and are disciplined. And as talented as Shamar Turner was, and Trevor, he was very talented.
Yeah.
He was an incredibly undisciplined football player. Incredibly undisciplined. And he got drafted in the second round because he's an elite talent. But there were times when you're like, this guy's unblockable. And then there are times like, I don't think he had the clue what he was supposed to do on that play. What we see now is they got bigger guys, run stuffers, gap eaters that can allow their linebackers to fly to the football. I think that's what Mike Elko wants. And not that they're just big stiffs that can't move, but I think that's what they're looking for. They got Tyler Onyedem out of the transfer portal. He's a good football player as well. He's listed as a starter on our lads. He's listed as a backup over there. He's a guy that 2 years ago at Iowa State had 6.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. So, I mean, like there's some talent there. There's size there up the middle to better suit what I think they're looking to do. So I don't think they're going to have an elite D-line, but I think it's going to still be a good D-line that can allow them, if they play more disciplined football, to be much improved over what they were last season. They won't be as flashy. They won't be as sexy, but I think there's enough talent here to have a pretty good defensive line, especially Trevor, when you look at those linebackers they got coming back.
Yeah, this Texas A&M linebacker room is one that I'm pretty high on. I really like Torian York. He comes back. He was ranked as Lindy's number 4 inside linebacker returning in college football this season. And then Scooby Williams, who was banged up a little bit last season, but that didn't prevent the two. They combined for 125 total tackles, 17 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks. They each had a pick, and I believe they each had a fumble recovery. And so this is a group where it fits to what Mike Elko wants to do on defense, to your point. Let your linebackers come downhill. Like Torian York, he's a very disciplined football player. He's not a crazy, flashy athlete. He doesn't have elite size. I mean, he's 6 foot. He's 235. But he's a very smart football player. He's an instinctive football player. He's a pretty good tackler. Scooby Williams, I would say, is the more athletic of the two. One, he's got to stay healthy. But 2, he has a little bit of the – sometimes can come in a little out of control to him, misses some tackles. But if he can get that short up, I really like this linebacker room, man, between Torian York and Scooby.
Well, and Scooby was in year 1 of that system, too, after transferring over from Florida. So he's going to be more – I mean, part of your – it's like Drake Bowen at times last year had, like, okay, you weren't real assignment correct. It's year 1 playing in that defense, right? And Scooby was in a situation where he wasn't necessarily a first-time starter. He had played a lot at Florida, but he was a first-time starter in this defense.
Yeah.
Learning the defense. And so now that Torian York also has another year in the system too, he'll be better served than to be the leader schematically of what they're all doing. And it's like when you look at the difference between like JD Bertrand in 2022 compared to 2023, year 1 in Al Golden system compared to year 2. That's the same thing with this group. You are correct. Scooby is definitely the twitchier athlete. He's definitely the rangier guy. Torian York is a lot like JD Bertrand, not the biggest guy. He's not an elite athlete, but he's a good enough athlete. He's a good athlete, but he's smart. He knows where to be. He's physical at the point of attack. He's just a good football player. Scooby may be a guy that if I'm an NFL scout, I might initially be more attracted to a guy like Scooby because of that athleticism. But then you look at Torian York and like, this guy is just steady as all get out, man. Like this guy just brings a lot of solidness. And they got good rotation players. It's not just those 2 guys, but there's some other guys at the rotation that could help out. Jordan Lockhart, they signed Noah McHale, who, I was very high on. And we didn't even talk about Marco Jones as a potential freshman defensive end that could play for them, who's a guy that I still wish Notre Dame would have gone after last year and landed.
Yeah.
But there's some freshmen on this front 7 that I think could help. If you're a veteran player at linebacker or defensive end, you better step up and play well early, or you may find yourself losing reps to Marco Jones on the edge or no McHale linebacker. You could absolutely be true because their front seven freshman class, Trevor, wasn't a giant freshman class, but there's some dudes that can play.
Yeah.
We talked about Marco Jones. I'm a huge fan of Noah McHale. DJ Sanders was a big time, talent coming out of high school. So there's some young bucks that are going to solidify this depth chart as well for Texas A&M.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of, it's up there with Pitt for the hardest linebacking core that Notre Dame is going to have to face this upcoming season. Texas A&M is right in that discussion. They're also one of the best in the country nationally. They're in that same discussion, just like Pitt is. So this is a talented group of kids, but yeah, this is a good linebacker room.
Yeah, they're probably the biggest of the good linebacker rooms that Notre Dame faces this year. I mean, a lot of the other ones are undersized. What I like about A&M is they can hold up against the run, especially York, a little bit better. They got the linebackers to be good against the run. It's all going to come down to, can they be more stout up front and let these guys run to the football? That's going to be the key. And the biggest thing for their front seven is you guys got to be more gap correct. They were very undisciplined up in the trenches last season, very undisciplined, and that's something that hurt. It hurt them multiple times against Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame ripped off multiple long runs against them. One got brought back, and then the next play they do the same exact. They run a different play, but have a big gain. You have the 47-yard touchdown, and then there was no excuse for Jeremiah Love not to get touched on that last touchdown run. Now, it was a great blocking by Notre Dame, but they were aided by Texas A&M, just not being gap conscious or gap just sound as a defense. I think that's something that really held them back last year.
Yeah, absolutely. The front seven, I guess, really front six for what this defense is going to be.
Used to saying that, Trev.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. The front defensive players for this for this defense is going to be interesting. The defensive line, it reminds me, again, drawing analogies here, a little bit back to what Notre Dame's situation is. A little bit. They don't have a Bryce Young on this depth chart, but what they do have is guys that can come at you in waves, solid football players that they can keep fresh and keep rotating in a similar fashion to where we talk about Notre Dame when the opposing offensive line is on snap, 60 or 70 of the game. Maybe Cassius Howell is on snap 45 of the game. Does that play a factor? See a little bit of that with Texas A&M's defensive line. Then at linebackers, if the D-line can be assignment correct and let them fly to the football while also still being assignment correct, this is going to be a good run defense for Texas A&M for sure. But where one of the more intriguing position groups on this defense is kind of the secondary as a whole. That one is interesting to say the least. They have Will Lee, who is, I'm confident in saying, the best corner that Notre Dame will face.
It's in the conversation, but yeah, I mean, for now, I think he's the most proven to be the best. I would say that's you could make that argument. We both have him on the first team, all opponent team.
Yep. Yeah. Will Lee's last season, Will Lee had 10 passes defended, 2 interceptions last season. He has a lot of length. You guys see it right there. He's 6'3". He's 190 pounds. The cornerback position opposite of him is where I start to have some questions between Des Ricks and Julian Humphrey, the transfer that they got from Georgia. One of those two guys, ideally for Mike Elko's defense, both, but one of those two guys has to step up and start playing up to the perceived hype that they had when they had coming into college. Because both players have good raw talent, but they have to elevate their game as football players, or else there's going to be a big hole to fill in that secondary. So between Des Ricks and Julian Humphrey, one of those two has to step up and play like the player that they were expected to be coming out of high school.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Trevor, they've got a chance to have one of the 3 or 4 best cornerback rooms in the SEC if those two guys step up. And that's going to be a big key. I mean, you mentioned both 5-star players. I think Will Lee is a very steady player. A lot of similarities between him and Cam Hart, a little bit different players, but a lot of similarities. You need those other two guys step up. And honestly, if they both step, and they got Jordan Shaw out of the transfer portal, who provides depth there too. But they have to play better. I don't know that they have to play like 5 stars. I don't think they don't need Des Ricks to play like the top 10 national player he was, or Julian Humphrey to play like the top 25 national player he was from a ranking standpoint. I don't think that's really necessary.
Yeah.
I just think they just need to be good football players. And at times last year they were. At times last year they were both good football players. But then, of course, as the year went on, Julian Humphrey ends up losing. I don't know if he got beat. I'll say it. He got benched at Georgia. And then instead of staying and sticking it out, he left. I'm not a big fan of that. What lessons did he learn from that? Is he more locked in? Does humility kind of motivate him a little bit? Like, I don't know. That's a good question. But that's going to be the key for him is stepping up and saying, hey, I'm going to be that guy. The thing is, they both now have a lot of experience. They both got a lot of reps last year. They got to take their game to another level. I think these two players, on top of the interior playing well, are arguably the biggest keys to this being a top SEC defense, or if it's just a good SEC defense. I expect to at least be a good SEC defense. It was average last year. I think it'll at least be good this year. But is it good enough for them to be a team fighting for a playoff spot? That's going to be determined by the tackles, and then they need one of these two guys step up. If they both step up, then this corner room all of a sudden becomes really good, along with Jordan Shaw, who transferred in. So, I think that's going to be a really big key for them, because Jordan Shaw's a good football player. I mean, he played at Washington last year. He had 37 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, had 6 pass breakups. So, he's no slouch of a football player either. He's a good football player as well. So, on paper, they look really good at corner. They just need those two young players to really step up and play to their potential.
Yep, absolutely. And then rounding it out with the safety position, they have Dalton Brooks coming back. He played against Notre Dame last season for the first series.
Yeah.
and he got ejected for targeting. Yeah. And then they also did Bryce Anderson. Is he a returning starter? Or did he transfer in?
Yeah, no. He's a returning starter. I think this will be his 3rd year as a starter, actually.
Okay, that's okay.
And Jared Kerr played a bunch for them last year too. And was a pretty good football player. So, like, their safety room is as solid as you're going to get. I mean, this is probably the best safety room Notre Dame will face this year. They're the polar opposites of the corners, in that I don't think they're the high-level elite athletes. They're just good football players.
Yeah.
And I think they were hurt more than any other group from the standpoint of the lack of consistency up front put them in a lot of bad spots on the back end. And I think that hurt them. But this is as good of a safety room as Notre Dame's going to find. Because, like, look, Jared Kerr is a starting caliber player. In my opinion, he's a good football player. He's just not as good as the two guys in front of him. So I think this is a really good safety room, a very steady safety room as well. At least they have the potential to be. Like I said, you go watch the film. I think a lot of times when they got in trouble, it was because they were put in some bad spots, more so than them necessarily struggling as football players. That was kind of my opinion of that duo last year. And like I said, Jared Kerr's a starting caliber football player, and produced like it too. I mean, it's not even like saying, like, in theory, I liked him coming out of high school, so I think he could play for them. It's also like you just look at the numbers and the production, that he had. So I think he was 2 years ago, he was a pretty key and rotation player for them at safety. So he's got a chance to be a good player as well. I like this group a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good safety room. I definitely agree. Definitely the opposite of where the cornerback position is.
I'm trying to remember. I think Kerr was hurt last year, or didn't play as much last year. So that'll be the interesting thing. But he definitely played a lot for them in 22 and 23. I'm not sure if he played as much for them last year, now that I'm thinking about it. But he's a good football player. He's a starting caliber football player.
Yeah, I'm looking at what some of his numbers are right now. I mean, in 22, he had 22 total tackles. 23, he had 20 total tackles. A couple of sacks, forced fumble.
Started a few games for them.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
what he did last year. I don't. I'd have to kind of go back and look at the film, but I don't know like how many snaps he played on defense last year compared to past years. I think he was a little banged up at times. I think he missed part of the offseason as well, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like some of the only minutes that he came in and played in were like garbage time minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, he played against McNeese, Bowling Green, New Mexico State, and then he played a little bit in the USC game, in the bowl game. So he might have been banged up. I'll have to go back and look at that too.
Yeah.
I'm not
PFF's
entirely sure.
down right now. I was trying to look it up, but I can't get it to pop up on my computer right now. So
Yeah, PFF's
a lot
been
of
giving
issues on
yeah.
stuff. PFF's having some issues. Irish Breakdown's been having some issues today. So our website's been having issues. So yeah, it's been a funky day. Very funky day, technology wise.
Love technology.
But yeah, this secondary's got a chance. And then Tyreek Chappell's a solid nickel. You know, they got in Bravion Rogers, who I believe is a portal guy as well. No, he was not a portal guy, actually. Hold on. Give me a second. Bravion Rogers, I got the Texas A&M roster right here. I thought he transferred in, but let me just check on that to be sure of that. But he was, no, he's been at Texas A&M the last 2 years. I thought he was a transfer for some reason, but he's their backup nickel. But Tyreek Chappell played a lot last year. Played a lot for them for a couple years, I believe. But he's a guy that could play safety for them also. He's a steady nickel. But I think this has a chance to be a really good secondary if those corners can step up opposite Will Lee. I think this has a chance to be a really steady, solid secondary this season. Very good group.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it is going to be at that cornerback 2 position between Des Riggs and Julian Humphrey. And if they can get one of those guys to play up to their potential, it's a good group. Definitely a good group. Any final thoughts on the defense here, Brian, before we move on?
It's really going to come down to how much control does Mike Elko take of the defense. Like, that's going to be the key for me, because if he's just going to let Jay Bateman run the show again, then I think they're going to see some of the similar issues they've had last year, and the same issues North Carolina had, in that you're just going to have just too many what was that plays. Like, did they forget that the B gap is kind of an important gap that you need to have somebody in? You know what I mean? Like, what are they doing right now? Like, I don't understand what that coverage was even trying to accomplish. Like, you'll have stuff like that. And so, I just look at it and say, if they can just be more steady, and I think that's what Mike Elko's defenses were at Duke. That's what Mike Elko's defense was at Notre Dame. It was just you're going to line up, you're going to know what to do, and you're going to fly to the football. And that's not what they were last year. I also think there were some players that weren't necessarily as bought in to what Notre Dame was trying to do last season. If they can perform better, that's going to be part of it as well. There's just a lot that goes into it, but this defense has it's a strange year in that they weren't very good on defense last season. Like at times they were pretty good. I mean, even the Notre Dame game, I said this at the time, Notre Dame missed a lot of opportunities in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the corner route where Will Lee falls down that if Riley Leonard sees it, it's a touchdown. I mean, there were opportunities. The dig route where Chris Mitchell's wide open for a catch and run at midfield and Riley just throws it into the ground. Like, you had an offensive line starting with 6 career starts going into that game. That O-line had no business going toe-to-toe and then whooping A&M down the stretch. And they did. Fourth quarter, Notre Dame's offensive line just took control of that game. They had no business doing that against Texas A&M. That's not a shot at Notre Dame. No offensive line with 6 career starts in game 1 should have done that to that D-line.
Sure.
It just no business happening. And then there's other weeks that D-line looked like world beaters. And that lack of consistency really did them in. That's just not a defense that should have given up 22 points a game. And you saw it early. I mean, they were good early in the year statistically. They weren't terrible. I mean, they held Notre Dame to 23, McNeese to 10, Florida to 20, BG to 20, Arkansas to 17, Mississippi State 20. But then the wheels kind of started to come off a little bit, especially after the LSU game. But it's as more people started seeing film of them, they started getting a little bit banged up. The lack of the holes in the defensive scheme started getting exposed more as people had more film, and they just fell apart down the stretch. In their last 6 games, they gave up 429 to LSU, 530 to South Carolina, 469 to Auburn, 458 to Texas, and then 400 to USC. And in 2 of those 5 games, they gave up 240 or more rushing yards.
Lordy.
And that's just, and then the game where they gave up 240 rushing yards, they gave up 218 passing yards to Texas. They gave up 301 passing yards to Auburn and 168 rushing yards. South Carolina rushed for 286 and passed for 244. And in their last 6 games, they gave up 5.9, 7.6, 6.5, 5.9, and 5.7 yards per play. The only exception was the game against New Mexico State, who went 3-9 and scored 21 points a game last year. They held them to 3 points and 214 yards of offense. So, I mean, you think about what their numbers were. 22 points a game, not great. Their scoring defense wasn't great. And let's go Texas A&M. They were 34th in scoring defense, not great. They were 63rd in total defense, which is not great. They were 62nd in yards per play, which is not great. Consider the fact that they played 2 FCS teams last year, or basically 2 FCS caliber teams, New Mexico State and McNeese State. And they held those teams to 279, and 214 yards. And then 3.5 yards per play, 4.7 yards per play. What do their numbers look like if you don't even include that? And, that's not a good place to be in for them, Trev. And I think that's where you look at it and say that the numbers on defense weren't even as good as what you think. But the reality is there's too much talent for them to not be better. There just is. I mean, there's too much talent for them to not be a better football team than they were last year on defense. And I think they will be. It's the same, like in year 2 of Mike Elko's tenure, I think they will be. We saw a lot of issues with Notre Dame in year 1 of their defense and just mistakes and just things that you wouldn't expect from a Marcus Freeman coach defense based on what we did as a DC. Well, then in year 2, after they get a year under their belt, that defense got way better. And I don't know that we're going to see the same kind of jump for multiple reasons, schedule being one of them. And then just, I don't know that they have quite the height that, I just think Notre Dame had better talent on the D-line in 23 in certain areas, but they're a good football team and a talented football team on defense. And they just be better this year. It's just going to come down to, can you be disciplined? Can you be assignment correct? Can you tackle better? That's another thing that A&M's got to get better at. That's true for a lot of teams. But I think that this is a team that's got a lot of potential on defense to be a really good football team. If Mike Elko can exert more of his influence, if the defense can play more like a Mike Elko coach defense than a Jay Bateman coach defense. Because let's be honest, Trev, Jay Bateman's talking about Mike Elko's influence. That wasn't Jay Bateman's choice. Like, that's Mike Elko's choice. And it's a wise choice. It's absolutely a wise choice.
Yeah, absolutely. The defense holds the key to this team being a playoff contender or a team contending for a conference title, or they're going to be, 8-4 at the end of the regular season again, or they're going to be out of that discussion in November again. So defense has to step it up for them. And I think they will. I think you were muted there on that last one. Sorry.
What's your bold prediction for the defense?
Bold prediction for the defense.
Mm-hmm.
I can't put numbers behind it, but I think they're going to be, they already might be, to be honest. I know we'll dive into it more when we get into other opponent previews. I think this is going to be the best secondary that Notre Dame faces. I think one of Des Ricks or Julian Humphrey steps up and is a good cornerback too next to Will Lee.
I dig that. My bold prediction for the for the A&M defense, and again, these are meant to be like everything goes right, and this is kind of what they're capable of, but it's not something a lot of people thinking about. Is my bold prediction for them is A&M finishes the year. It's similar to yours. A&M finishes the year with one of the 5 best secondaries in college football. It goes along with what you're talking about. Dalton Brooks is healthy. One or both of Ricks and Humphrey steps up and plays like to their 5-star potential, and the pass rush is more consistent than it was here. It won't be as dynamic, but it's more consistent. If that happens, this could end up being a really good secondary for Texas A&M.
I like that.
Yeah, that's their ceiling as a secondary. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's kind of my fun, bold prediction. But the problem for A&M is they have the potential to be that, but they also have the potential to look exactly like they did last year.
Yeah.
That's the concern. And that's what we don't know what they're going to be in year 2. So
yeah,
it's going to be fun to watch. And
100%.
I like Mike Elko. I mean, I haven't hidden that fact. I think he's a good football coach. And I think that being in year 2 in that system is going to go well for them. I also like the fact that they didn't lose a lot in the portal. Like, that told me a little something. They lost guys in the NFL, but they didn't lose a lot of guys to the portal. All their linemen came back. A lot of their D linemen came back. Their linebackers both came back. None of their secondary starters jumped in the portal for big contracts. That tells me something. Terry Bussey didn't jump in the portal. All their running backs are coming back. That tells me a little something about where this team is. The level of buy-in that this football team has is that they didn't have a lot of those departures that some other teams had to deal with.
I'll have to go back and look, but the last time that I checked, I don't think Texas A&M took a player in the spring portal because I don't think they had to. Yeah. I'll have to go back and check. But
yeah, I'm not sure if they did, honestly, because like you said, I don't know that they had. There was a couple guys kind of like Notre Dame that they kicked the tires on a little bit. But to your point, I don't know that they did. I'm actually looking that up right now. I'm looking up the 2025 recruiting class for them and looking at their transfers. Does it not show dates on here for these guys? It does on high school kids, but it doesn't on them. Yeah, it doesn't say. Like, I know they got Jonah Wilson at receiver in January. I'm pretty sure they got Amari Niblack in the winter portal as well.
They did.
They got Kevin Concepcion in the winter portal for sure. I think Sam Mpemba was in the winter portal. Mario Craver was in the winter portal. Humphrey was in the winter portal. So, yeah, I'm not sure. They didn't get anybody that we talked about in the winter portal. And I think the only guy that they lost in the winter portal was Micah Hudson.
He's the only guy they lost. He
was with them for 5 minutes and then you know what I mean? It's like, you can't lose what you didn't have. So, yeah.
But no, this defense's team as a whole, I think culturally is in a better spot than where they were at last year. Elko going into year 2, they didn't have to take any spring portal additions. They kept their losses to a minimal. The coaching staff stayed together. So it's going to be an interesting one. I think last thing we're doing today, right, Brian? Season prediction for Texas A&M.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So quick kind of little rattle off of what their schedule is.
Let me just go and pull that bad boy up, Trev, because you know what? I got it right here. I came prepared today, man.
Love it. We love it. So this is
real quick, date, team, if there's a current kickoff time, and then the far one is if they played last year, what the result was.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is what their schedule is this year. Odds are they're going to be undefeated when they host or when they travel up to Notre Dame, and then they have a bye after that. So odds are if Texas A&M starts the season ranked, they will be ranked when they come.
Bro, if they're not undefeated coming to play Notre Dame, then this is going to be a long year. Yeah. Long year for Texas A&M.
Yep. Absolutely. So when you look at this overall schedule, what are some of the things that stick out to you here? Because when I look at this, that little stretch without a bye from October 11th to October 25th, they're really going to be looking forward to that bye week. That's for sure.
Couple things, Trev, is number one, you've got to hold serve at home.
Mm-hmm.
Your road schedule is brutal. You've got to play at Notre Dame. You got to play at Arkansas, which is a rivalry game. Actually, the Arkansas game, is that still in Dallas? I know they played it in Dallas last year, but I heard something about they were talking about maybe moving that game.
I'm not sure.
I'm gonna give me a second because I think that game might be in Dallas, but I'm gonna go look at that one real quick. But they played that in Arlington a lot of years. Let me go see here real quick. The Arkansas game. It's actually in Fayetteville this year. So that's not going to be a neutral site game. So I was correct. It is at Arkansas. You play at LSU, at Missouri, at Texas. None of those games are easy. You can lose every single one of them. You can also win a couple of them. They're capable of going into Fayetteville and beating Arkansas. They're capable of going down to Baton Rouge and beating LSU. They're capable of beating Missouri on the road, and they're capable of beating Texas, and they're capable of beating Notre Dame on the road. They're capable of winning all those games. It's going to be tough to win them all, but you can't afford to have a home slip up to a team like Auburn or a team like Florida, a team like South Carolina. And this is what I think makes their schedule challenging. I mean, you've got UTSA and Utah State to start the season. And UTSA, I'm not sure what they're going to be this year, but a couple of years ago, that UTSA team was really good. I mean, in 2022, for example, when they went 11-3, they were scoring almost 40 points a game. And then, the year after that, they went 9-4. They slipped up last year, went 7-6, but they've got a lot of guys coming back. Utah State, that's where Bronco Mendenhall is now. But those should be comfortable wins for Texas A&M. But it's kind of like Notre Dame. Notre Dame's G5 games are against Navy and Boise State. These aren't as good as those two teams, but they're no slouches. Samford at the end of the year, that should be an easy win. But Auburn's a team that should be improved this year. Mississippi State will be improved. They won't be very good, I don't think, but they'll be improved. Florida's a preseason top 25 team. Arkansas on the road will be a tough game. LSU on the road is going to be a tough game. Missouri on the road is going to be a tough game. You get South Carolina at home. They're a preseason top 15 to 20 team. And then you end the road or end the season against Texas. You can make a case that they've got to play the two most talented rosters in college football this year on the road.
Yeah.
When you look at Notre Dame and Texas. And then LSU's a talented roster. South Carolina is a talented roster. Missouri's no slouches. And Missouri's going to want a little payback for the beatdown A&M put on them last year. So this is a tough schedule. I mean, you could see a scenario where they're 8-4, Trev, and a better team than they were last year.
Yep.
But I think expectations-wise, I think you need at least a one-game improvement in the regular season and to win a bowl game. I think that's the expectation I have for A&M in year two. Is you've got to you're 9-3 is sort of, if you are 9-3 or better, you've taken a pretty good step this year. There's a scenario where I could say they're 8-4 and they're better than they were last year, but it won't be that much better because you're still 8-4. At the end of the day, you're still 8-4, and that's going to be the key. So What does that mean? Hold serve at home. That gives you 7 wins, right? UTSA, Utah State, Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, South Carolina, Samford. You got to hold serve at home. And then of the 5 road games, you just got to go 2-3 in those. So, let's say you lose to LSU, Texas, and Notre Dame, but you beat Arkansas, you beat Missouri. That's doable. That's certainly doable. And I think going 3-2 in those games is doable. It's going to be tough, but it's doable. But you lose a game at home, and that becomes a lot tougher. And that's why I think holding serve at home this year is incredibly important for Texas A&M, especially when you consider that of their first 6 games, only one of them is on the road. You start 5-1 and at least be competitive at Notre Dame. Obviously, the goal is to beat Notre Dame for them. But as long as you're at least competitive at Notre Dame, you're going to have some confidence. You get a bye week, and then you go on a nice little run until you got to play Arkansas. You're 5-1. All of a sudden, you're feeling a little bit better about where your football team is next year. So, I think holding serve at home is going to be very important, very, very important for them. And Arkansas is going to be coming off of a 4-game stretch of Ole Miss on the road, Memphis on the road, Notre Dame, and at Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they going to be at mentally at that game? So there's opportunities for Texas A&M to have a pretty good football team this year. If they're not able to improve their record, though, I think that you could say that could get them into some some issues.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree. Are we doing record predictions for Texas A&M?
Yes.
Awesome.
Would you like to?
I would love to.
Let's do it. I have them at 9-3. I have them holding serve at home, and I have them going 2-3 on the road. I have them at 9-3. Could they be better than that? Yes. If they're 10-2 this year, am I going to be shocked? No. But they've got to prove something to me consistency-wise, and they got to prove to me that they can play a little bit better on the road than they did last season before I'm ready to completely jump on the bandwagon of Texas A&M. Yeah, they had a nice, they just didn't play that well away from home last year. They didn't. The Florida game was a win, but it was an ugly win. You beat Mississippi State on the road in another ugly game, another ugly win over a not very good team, and then you got smacked by South Carolina, and then you lost to Auburn. You got to play better on the road. But I mean, two of their 4 losses in the regular season were at home. But again, they were to college football semifinalists. You got to now play those teams on the road. You can't afford to have any hiccups at home this year. So that's going to be key. So I have them at 9-3. Is my prediction right now for Texas A&M, with capable of being 10-2. Depending on who your losses are to and who your wins are over, 9-3 could have them in a very good argument for being a playoff team if this year's a lot like last year was.
Yep, I agree. I also have them at 9-3. Definitely the potential to go 9-2. Some of the ones that I had trouble with, I am pretty high on this Florida team this year, but when they play Texas A&M in Kyle Field, they will just get done having played at LSU, at Miami, home against Texas. And then the fourth game of that is them playing at Kyle Field. Where are they going to be at? And all of that is without a bye. Those are consecutive games for Florida. And so I have Texas A&M over Florida in that one. And then I have some I have them holding serve at home like you do. And then I have them losing to Notre Dame on the road, LSU on the road, and Texas on the road. But it would not shock me if they were able to get by beating one of LSU or Texas. Texas might be a little bit more difficult because of what their roster might be, but I have similar feelings to kind of what you said at the start of last season of I wouldn't want to play Texas A&M in November.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel that way about this year's team, assuming they're able to stay healthy and do some of the things that we were predicting earlier today. And when I mean predicting, I don't mean like the set, like Will Lee or I'm sorry, Des Ricks or Julian Humphrey becoming like standout corners, but they're able to establish some sort of offensive identity. And if their defensive line is able to, play more assignment correct football, I could see them sneaking out a win over Texas, depending on what Texas's season looks like. Yeah. But yeah, I have them at 9-3 with 2 conference losses.
Mm-hmm. It's prove it time though. I mean, you hired a coach you like. You had a guy that's been there, that understands your school. He was a defensive coordinator there. Now's the time to prove it, because there's a lot of people in the chat like, oh, they'll be 8-4 like always. Well, there's a reason for that people are saying that, because how many years have we been hearing A&M's going to be better this year? A&M's going to be better this year. A&M's going to be better this year, and they're not. And like, except for the COVID year was the anomaly. So this is Mike Elko's opportunity to prove I'm not Jimbo Fisher. I'm not Dennis Francione. I'm not Kevin Sumlin. I'm a guy that's going to build a steady winner here. And that's going to be the challenge for him this season. Can he prove it? We'll find out. We're going to find out. But there's enough talent on that team for them to go 9-3 against that schedule, which is a tough schedule. It's a tough schedule. And anything beyond that, I think, is an excellent season. You win 10 games in the regular season, barring just some of these teams just being not nearly as good as we thought. Like Florida's not as good as we thought. LSU stinks. Okay, then it takes a little away. But still, even with that 10-2 against that schedule's no cakewalk by any stretch. It's funny you talked about A&M being a team you don't want to play in November. I believe that this year as well, but I also believe that about Texas.
Yeah. Yep. No, absolutely.
I think Texas is a team that will be much better at the end of the season than they are early in the season. Yeah.
Agreed.
So yeah, that's the Texas A&M preview. Yeah.
Well, good deal. Well, all right, folks. That's going to do it for us here today.
We're already over 3 hours, so we're going to not do a mailbag today because we didn't get a ton of questions, but I just definitely want to. Andrew Gilmore and Tommy both had questions. You guys could put those on the message board. Once it's up again. It's currently not up, but once it's up again, put those questions on the mailbag, and I'll be able to answer those from today's show. But yeah.
Well, good deal. Well, that'll do it for us here today. Recapping what Notre Dame needs to do over the summer on offense and defense and breaking down Texas A&M. We're going to continue with the opponent previews as the weeks of the offseason continue to go along. Be sure to hop over to IB Nation Sports Talk. They're going to go live tonight at 5 p.m. Lots been happening in Notre Dame's offseason. Some stuff specifically with basketball as well. Landed some top recruits. I think they're going to cover some of that on tonight's show as well. But what's up?
No, I thought they covered that last night. Are they talking about it again tonight?
Oh, I'm not
they're
sure.
actually interviewing Tony Simeone tonight. Sean's going to interview him. He's going to have him on. But yeah, they interviewed that last night, or they did that last night.
Good deal. Well, before you head out of here today, folks, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast.
Trev's got stories on the front page too, by the way, breaking down those two commitments. Those were big ones. I've had a chance to watch that center last night.
I'm excited.
He's not bad, man. He's bigger than 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
He's definitely taller than 7 feet. Like he's probably 7'2", 7'3". That's a big boy, man.
Moves well. Better than what you would think of a 7-foot kid.
Yeah. Had a couple backdoor passes he was throwing. I was like, oh, okay. He's a bit raw, but there's something to work with there, man.
Comfortable coming up on the perimeter, setting high ball screens. Yeah.
I was like, okay, let's see what this kid can do. You hear that he's the adopted son of John Sanderson, and you're like, okay, is he coming because that's what they needed to do to get Jonathan Sanderson? And you're like, nope.
Mm-hmm.
that kid's got some tools.
Yeah.
He's got some tools. Yeah.
I'm excited to watch him, but Micah Shrewsbury's picking up where he left off from the 2025.
Check out Trevor's stories on them, guys. It's at irishbreakdown.com. He had some stuff on that. We were pretty fired up to cover that. So good stuff.
Well, you guys know what it is. As always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian and I will be back tomorrow for the buy, sell, hold. I believe Salty already has the thread up on the board. So make sure you go and post your submissions. But until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.